If you have been enjoying Edinburgh Business Stories and you want to keep up to date with some of the new episodes we've got coming out every other week, then why not subscribe? The stories, the guests we have are absolutely incredible and we wouldn't want you to miss out. Franco, Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So give us a snapshot, who you are and what your business is.
Okay, so, we're retailers in Edinburgh. We have a chain of what used to be convenience stores, but now we regard ourselves more as food stores. Mm-hmm. We started way back. Personally, I started working in the shop that my father had back in 1963. Mm-hmm. So that was at the top of St. Mary Street, just off the Royal Mile. We spent about 5 years there. Mm-hmm. And then we moved over to Toll Cross and Rome Place. And we had a cafe and made ice cream on the premises. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of a change. But we ran both shops at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the whole family was involved.
Great. And the name of your shop just now is?
Margiotta Food and Wine.
There you go.
It sounds so much better when you say it than when we say it.
We call it Margie's.
Actually just all do.
Margie, is it?
Most
okay.
people.
What are some of the other names, just before we get started, what are some of the other names?
Well, some people, if they're trying to be posh, they say Margiotta. Or others just say Margiottas, which is totally wrong, of course.
For clarification, that is not how.
So how should you say it?
Margiotta.
Margiotta.
So if you took the GI out and replaced it with a J, you would get the right pronunciation. Margiotta. The I is only there to make the O a soft sound. Okay. Without the I, it would be Margiotta. That's all the Italian lesson I'm going to give today.
We had a lesson in kind of names from Tiso, didn't we?
Yeah, because that was Tiso or Tiso as well was the other one.
Yeah. So anyway,
there you go. So great. So yeah, family's been in retail stores forever. Is that?
Well, since 1963.
Yeah.
I left school in one day and started in the shop the next day. That was it. 1963.
Take us back then to the start.
The family actually started with my grandfather, who came over at the end of the 19th century, start of the 20th century. He, with his brother, found their way up to Royal Deeside. Mm-hmm. And so they opened up, eventually got a bit of money together because they came all the way from Italy without a penny. And so eventually they opened up sort of ice cream shops and cafes. They weren't the only ones. There was quite a few made their trek over to the UK and did a similar thing. But they started off in Bankery and then moved over to Stonehaven and all the way along to Balmoral. So probably at some point they might have sold an ice cream to the Queen Mother.
Yeah.
Who knows,
Brilliant.
So my grandfather, he was married, but his wife died. And so he then married my grandmother. And they had a child, which was my mother. She was born in 1919. And then when she was only 13, they decided to go back home, really, to the village in Italy. So they sold their business and went back to the village.
Which village was that, Franco?
It's called Picinisco. And the great majority of Italians living in Edinburgh come from that village.
Is that right?
Including all the Crollas and the Pias.
More people know about it in Edinburgh than they do in Italy. You go to Rome, no one's heard of it. But you go to Edinburgh, there's a good chance somebody's heard of it.
Wow, right.
Mind you, there's only 1,500 people that live there.
Yeah.
You know, and it does cover quite a large area. But Italy is very rural in that part of the world. Anyway, so from the time that they retired, my grandfather built a new house in the village. He made decent money and he was quite well off.
Yeah.
He had investments, he had money in the bank. And then the war came and the Italian economy collapsed and we went back to not really having any money, along with everybody else in the villages there. So back in 1956, my mother and father, because my mother had her British passport still, decided to come over to Edinburgh, where she still had a living auntie. And that was it. So they came over with my older brother. And so Mum and Dad came over with my older brother. My father only stayed a couple of weeks because he had the rest of us to look after. And with my mother being able to speak English and staying with my auntie, her auntie, she, she's got a job and started working away. A year later, we all came over. She'd managed to find a flat close by. We lived in Commercial Street in Leith, right by the docks, which is quite interesting. So she and my brother had saved the money, and we all came over, and that's that.
What was life like then? So at this point, you're kind of living in Commercial Street in Leith versus kind of the small village in Italy. So what was it like as a young kid?
Well, we came just 3 days before Christmas, and I must say it felt a bit like moving from colour to black and white. Or more like grey, because in those days,
welcome to Scotland.
So in those days, everybody had chimneys using coal and all the rest, and it was often foggy. And of course, you got the har from the docks at Leith. It wasn't that pretty, really, to my mind. And I remember that a lot of the men there that worked at the docks and things looked a wee bit like Pa Brun. Just sort of slightly hunched over and stuff. Of course, everybody looked old to me because I was only 9. But that's fine. After that, you got used to the change and made friends locally and at school. And it was fine. It was enjoyable.
And did your entrepreneurial journey start then? Because there's a story from when you were younger.
Well, there is a story that I hardly remember, but I do remember a little bit of it that my mother told me later, or reminded me later. In the village, the neighbouring village, a slightly bigger village, every Monday they had a fruit market where you went and got all what you needed. And then there was people selling pots and pans and things, and they would all shout out 100 lire a pezzo, which means everything for 100 lira, which would have been very cheap in those days. Anyway, so I was quite impressed with that. These people vying for business, from the people that turned up to the market. And so one day I started taking all the pots and pans and knives and forks off the kitchen and put it outside and made my own little stall outside the front door. And of course, our village has only got 12 people. 12 houses. And there wasn't, but there's always somebody walking up and down. And I would stop and shout out that slogan, so 100 lire a pezzo. And of course they laughed and they pretended to buy stuff from me. So
and that's where it all started then, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
I only heard about this story because I did something similar when I was about the same age. We were at the beach and I dug this big moat and it filled up with water and the tide had gone out at this point. So it was a fair walk to go and get your bucket of water to build your sandcastle. So I thought it'd be a good idea to charge for my water, which is more geographically close to where the sandcastles were getting built. Of course, again, nobody actually purchased any of my water, but it was from doing that at about 5-6 years old, being told by my mum's like, well, your grandma has a story about your dad, and it shows that there was maybe a similar way of thinking at a similar age. So yeah.
That's brilliant. It's in the blood, eh?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Great.
Brilliant.
So you're in Leith, you're 9, 10, 11. At what point do the shops start?
At the age of 15, I was 15. I just left. Back in those days, you know, they had a sort of system where you had a junior secondary and a senior secondary. Okay. And so I sat my 11 plus and just narrowly missed getting my English. So I was deemed unworthy to go to the senior secondary. So I was put in a junior secondary, and in those days it only went up to third year. So at the age of 15, Julie left, and the next day, as I said, went straight into the shop. And that was our first shop that we had.
On St. Mary's
just in St. Mary's Street.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a grocery store.
No,
then.
that was was one of these sort of newsagent, not newsagent tobacconist confectionery, but we also sold ice cream, made it on the premises.
Great. So then, how did you end up taking over stores or starting new stores? What was that story?
Well, I think, you know, that lasted for a while. And as I said, we moved to Tollcross with an ice cream as a main feature of that shop. But then when my father retired, the rest of the family, myself and my two younger sisters, we just carried on the business. And that lasted for a good while. And then I left the business for a while. Had a sort of midlife crisis, if you like.
All right, tell us more.
So I decided, being a good Catholic boy, that I would, and I was wanting to do something different. I wanted to do some good in the world rather than just work in a shop. So I decided that the right path for me might be to go and study for a priesthood. And so I left the business
you can
at the
tell
age
where
of...
it ended based on my existence.
Okay. So I was about 28 and working in a shop all my life, as I said, and just needed this change. So I decided and applied for the priesthood. And in those days, the Archdiocese of Edinburgh, they had people who they would send to Rome to study, which I thought wouldn't be a bad idea at all. And some would go to a place called Drygrange, which is in the Scottish borders, just at Leatherfoot.
Was this a bit like that talent show by Simon Cowell, where some of them got to go to LA, some of them got to go to Marca, and then some got Dublin?
All right, I know where this is going.
I think so.
Similar, okay.
But at the same time, you know, being a sort of close to my family, it was only an hour's drive away, so that was comforting. But so I went there, and it was great. A lot of camaraderie with all the boys that were in a similar position as myself. And we finally got some proper education there. I mean, apart from studying theology, you know, we studied philosophy, we studied logic, history. So it was great, you know, and I really took to it. It's the first time I began to feel a sort of self-confidence. I always regarded myself as being a bit dumb, you know, because of my school experience. But then I discovered that I had an appetite for learning, and I read and read and read. And I was there for 4 years. But eventually my studies brought me to the point where I no longer believed. I just didn't believe anymore. And so what's the point? Staying on. So I left and then met my wife, and we got married about 3 years later, and a couple of years after that, Joe was born. And,
all right.
But after I left the seminary, I went straight back to the family business, and I was with a renewed enthusiasm that really, I think, overwhelmed the rest of the family, because everybody was in a nice place. We had, the 2-3 shops, and it was going well. But I had this burning ambition to, conquer and have more and more shops, which caused a bit of tension within the family. But then we thought, well, it was better if I just did my own thing rather than trying to drag everybody to a place they didn't want to go. And so that's what happened. After I got married, we started our first shop by ourselves in Warrender Park in Marchmont.
Right. Yeah.
And so at that time, we had, the business was kind of like, we'd gone into groceries.
Yeah.
So we had still the same tobacconist, confectioners, ice cream shop.
Yeah.
And then we had the grocery side with fruit and veg and all the rest. I was more drawn towards the grocery side, and my brother and sister were more drawn to the other side of the business. And so we just parted company as friends, and still great family relationship. Yeah. But I decided to go into that line of work, and that's it.
And at this point in time as well, so what kind of year are we talking, out of interest?
Well, we're talking about 1990.
1990. So what were the big grocers, or the malts? Who were you competing? I mean, the big ones.
Willie Lowe's.
Willie Lowe's, yeah.
Willie Lowe's was just further up the road from us. There was Presto,
which became Safeway.
Exactly.
And then
yes,
Morrison's,
and Morrison's. And there's obviously the Scottmid.
Yeah.
Scottmid was prevalent, as they are now today. They're all over the place. Yeah. But there was plenty business for all of us. Marchmont being so heavily populated, there were lots of students, lots of young families, and it was great, so business was good, and decided to expand, and we bought the shop in Comiston Road, just off Morningside, and that proved to be successful as well. And then the shop at Warrender, the people next door were closing their business, and so we bought that, and knocked through the wall and enlarged the shop. And we did that again. So the shop, as you see it now, it's like a rabbit warren. You go from one place to another. Yeah. And because it was downhill, we had to keep building up the floor. But that was a great.
And at this point, I mean, because of my background in kind of your industry, I guess, kind of from years ago, I remember Margiotta as well. You were different. To maybe some of the other offerings as well in convenience or then grocery retail, it felt. So I mean, what kind of philosophy did you bring? What was your angle as you kind of came in?
Well, as you say, there was a lot of competition there, and we thought, to be different. We were always, when we just tried to be as friendly and as welcoming as you possibly can be. In the sort of, and where I come from, in sort of southern Mediterranean culture, we have, when you invite somebody to your house, you don't just give them food and wine, you lay on a banquet. And so, irrespective of whether you're rich or poor, but everybody pulls out the stop. Now, that happens everywhere else as well, but I think that particular region of southern Mediterranean seems to be even more so. And I was always sort of wedded to that. And so the first thing is greeting everybody, being very friendly, and just like I did outside my house in the village, I saw myself as putting out a stall, but I didn't want to shout to people to come and buy, because that's not my personality at all. So I thought, I'll give them the best stall, the best shop that's in the neighbourhood. Great. And always had that feeling that we had to be the best at everything.
And I mean, the shops are standout as well. Like you do notice, I always, being in loads of them, it is different. You do go in and you don't feel like you're in a Tesco or a Sainsbury's. Like you feel like it's like homely.
Classical music, things like that, nice ambience. Yeah.
Have you ever had kind of people thinking that you're a bigger corporate?
That has happened. You do get, I remember being in one of the stores and a woman being on the phone and talking to her friend. I think she was an exchange student, and she was speaking to her friend. I think they were both from Spain, and they were talking, and they were saying, and she was like, "Oh, I'm in Margiotta's," but her friend was in London, and just assuming because she'd just landed in Edinburgh, she'd only been here a few weeks, and she'd seen so many of our stores, she just assumed, oh, wherever you go in the UK, that's probably similar. Much like Tesco and Sainsbury's. And actually, it was flattering because you think, okay, if we can reach the standard that the national chain set, then we're doing something right. But just hearing that and going, well, it's interesting, thinking that we're a little bit bigger than we are, but actually no, we're just Edinburgh and East Lothian, and we're still a family-run business. So there's not all that much scale to us, although we're trying. We want to get there. One day we want to get to that position like the big boys do, where you're huge and you're having to pretend you're small and local. You're dealing with a farmer on name-to-name basis, even though you're turning over like 2 billion a year. That'd be a good position to be in. Right now, though, we are genuinely local, yes.
And so how, Joe, is your story into all of this?
Just watching my dad from, small ages, and just, watching him work 16-hour days a lot of the time. And so, seeing the work that went into it, it kind of felt like it was my responsibility, I suppose, to pick up the mantle along with my sisters, for the life that we were afforded based on the work that my dad had put in, just to kind of take it on, and not through any sort of even charity, like, oh, I feel like I have to do this. It's just, it was a fantastic opportunity, and having a business kind of laid out in front of you that you can then put a little bit of your own stamp on and bring forward is, an opportunity that most people aren't afforded. So I feel like I would have been foolish to pass it up and go and do something else. So that I kind of, intermittently, I'd work in there since I was 13, like £20 for a whole shift, and just lifting boxes and filling shelves and migrating to the warehouse and doing various bits and bobs. But it was about 10 years ago that I then kind of settled in the head office, trying to make decisions that were a bit more meaningful than should I fill up the Coke now or later, and a bit more got enough iron brew. That was about 10 years ago that really got involved. But I've been since the age of 13 kind of doing little bits and bobs in amongst traveling and other things.
And how was that? Because obviously it's a family business. So Franco, you've got 4 children?
Yep.
And a 5th as well, really.
I think
you alluded to.
When a family came along, it was kind of difficult, because it's just kind of about that time where fathers were expected to take a part in the raising of their children, and I was really into that, though, because, I've always loved kids and wanted to have kids, even though it took that slight detour for a while. But, so that was quite tough at that time. And Joe never slept a wink. Day or night, he was. Yes. So
I like to be entertained.
Indeed. But yes, though. But my wife, long-suffering wife, she's a very good mother. She was cut out to be a mother, and she managed to keep the 4 of them happy and allow me to work, which was a real bonus, but also the girls now, they all went on to study. One of them's a fashion designer, 2 are geologists. But when they started applying for jobs, they took a job within the company while they were applying for jobs. And but most of the jobs that were suited to them tended to be down south in London. and nobody wanted to leave Edinburgh, So the part-time job they had within the company grew to full-time jobs, and they're very active within the business, and they've contributed as much as Joe, and they have their unique talents, and which is takes a lot off my shoulders, I must confess, Two of my girls have got babies now, so they're taking more of a back seat at the moment, but it was tough.
They're just bringing in more of the talent for the future, aren't they?
Well, this is it. They have their unique talents, which is amazing. That's just that I didn't see that. Equally, though, it's difficult when you've got a shop that's named after your name. What happens to that? You can't really sell it, and take the money. I always felt this imperative that I had to carry on the business. So when the kids came into the business, I thought, well, that's fine. At some point, I can hang up my my grocer's jacket. But
I doubt that'll happen anytime soon.
So just to clarify, so the fifth child that you alluded to, of course, was or is the business.
The business, yes.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it becomes all consuming, doesn't it? Kind of running your own business, eh?
It does, because you want to, as I said, with the name above the door, and I want to walk down the street and not have people saying, "Oh, there goes that miserly whatever," and you want to, you have a pride in your work, and you want to deliver the best you can, and that's what we try to do every day.
It does consume a lot of your thoughts as well. You find yourself on a walk in the evening thinking, is 5 kinds of aerosols enough? Or, I saw Tesco has 10. Should we maybe have 10? It gets to minutia sometimes, maybe not always to the best, but you just can't help it. You can't switch off. There's always, as soon as you've solved one problem, you're thinking, okay, what's the next thing we can do? What's the, you're always, so it does consume a lot of my time anyway. I'm a member of the One Spa, which is brilliant. I'd recommend it to everyone.
I was a member for a long time.
I wouldn't recommend it to nobody, actually. I quite like how quiet it is at the moment. But me and my partner, we're in there and we're in the bubbles and we're just relaxing. And most people just saying nothing, close their eyes and stuff. And I'm just kind of looking at her and she's like, "You want to say something about the business, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I had an idea. I want to run it past you." So you do find it hard to switch off sometimes, but I enjoy it. It makes me happy. So it's not hardship, I'd say. Yeah.
And how have you found the father-son dynamic? Like, what is that like? We speak to loads of family businesses and there's some incredible success stories and some not so. How have you guys muddled through that to make sure it's still healthy and family and work is still separate but together?
So it's not very separate. You will find yourself talking about it even maybe on Christmas. In healthy amounts. It's not all consuming, but they always say opposites attract. I suppose that's with partners, and they say that if you're even in business though, if you've got different things. I'm not sure that's actually true, because me and my dad think very similar, and that helps a lot. I think actually having somebody who has the complete opposite idea of what's good really doesn't lead, even though they can see a different perspective. It's great to have people within the company who can see things from different angles, but definitely when it comes to bringing the business forward, being on the same page or having ideas that we both are like, "Oh, I was just thinking that," and stuff. I think that does help a lot. I think if we were very different people, that would be a challenge, but luckily we're not.
I'm interested. Have you ever kind of had that, like, "Oh, I've got an idea," and the other says, "I've just been thinking the same thing"? Have you had that kind of? Often. Yeah. Go on. Have you got an example that springs to mind?
Oh, I don't know. I'm actually none to mind when it comes to me and my dad. I think it's small, subtle things that happen often. No like big stories, but every so often, you're on the right track when the likes of Tesco does your idea. So you're like thinking you're in the express store and think, "I'd do it this way," or something, thinking like, I've got an idea. I think, they're missing a trick here. And then you come in a few months and the thing you thought of, they'd done it, they'd reduced down another section, opened up on something else. You're like, Oh, I was going to do that, but I guess they've already beat me to the punch now. But it's good because you go in, you think, well, they've got very big teams dedicated to this kind of thinking. So if you're on the similar, wavelength as them, you think, okay, well, that's positive.
And you've made quite a big contribution as well since you've come into the business. What would you say is your kind of biggest thing that initiative that you've?
Well, maybe the Waitrose relationship. I think when I joined in a meaningful way, we were on about 6 stores. We're now up at 11. That's not taking full credit to the half of the business that has grown by any means. But I think having like the next generation coming in probably gave my dad the confidence to say, actually, we can keep growing because I know where this is going. I think if you're heading into your 70s and you're a store of 6, you think, oh, let's make this 12. I think my mum would have been like, if we'd all scattered and gone away. So maybe just the virtue of being there has helped maybe with my dad a little bit, and then being able to take some of those responsibilities off. My dad was pretty much solely responsible for the wine. We didn't really have anybody else in the business that knew anything about wine. But you see like
what a hardship.
Nice category to kind of look at.
Exactly. But you see how somehow, having those real day-to-day responsibilities can be a bit dragging. And I think actually he's afforded himself, after all these years, a bit of relaxing time where he doesn't need to be present for every day-to-day thing. It's more the big ideas, that kind of stuff is where his mind should be after all these years of putting in the hard graft. So for me, it was a case of like going to a wine course, learning about research it, and just learning enough myself. I'm by no means an expert, but I now know enough to be able to make good decisions when it comes to the range, and just being able to take some roles off my dad that he felt very responsible for probably helps a little bit as well. And then actually we've got such an amazing team. We've got an operations team that do so much of the day-to-day running that kind of feel almost guilty about it, being in my 30s and already being in the position where so much is delegated, that I afford myself time to have that free flow and thinking and trying new things, which my dad wasn't afforded until his 70s. But it really does help push the business forward if you have the time, not just to chase your tail, but know that the tail's been chased for you essentially, and you can think of the next thing.
Anyone listening into this just now kind of probably is envious of that position, because to your point, just to have that headspace where other people are just getting on with doing stuff and you can then think about the next thing. Amazing.
Absolutely. There's always more things to do, and I think especially within the convenience realm, all the big players are in there. I mean, Tesco and Sainsbury's for a long time. Morrison's Dailies are spreading, Asda Expresses. Even our partner Waitrose is looking to get more little Waitrose growing. Even in Stockbridge, a new M&S just opened, and it's quite a small format. So I think it's a good thing, because actually standards rising just means we have to be even better. And I like that challenge, like to put down the gauntlet. Look what M&S is doing. Can you raise your level to come up to where they are? And I think that's a fantastic thing. So I've still got enough years and energy left in me to feel like, let's do this. And it's you get inspired by seeing what others are doing as well. So
and obviously the Waitrose thing. Can you tell us a little bit about where that all came from?
Yeah, it was really a shot in the dark. I mean, my dad always kind of had that attitude of, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I remember one day I was sitting down and we were with a wholesaler called Nisa. They're owned by the co-op, and basically they just supply wholesale for anyone who doesn't understand how it works. I mean, if you're a Tesco or a Sainsbury's, you've got your relationships with your suppliers, Heinz, Coca-Cola, whoever it is, and that's that. Whereas if you're a small company, you might not have the scale to go to Coca-Cola, certainly not negotiate good pricing. So you've got these intermediaries who do that for you, and we kind of class them as wholesalers. I'm sure most people, Costco's one that people can actually go into, and you can see that. So we were dealing with one of these wholesalers called Nisa. They were very good, and they were very well set up for convenience. However, I think the direction we were going in was more fresh, more grocery, a little bit more in that Waitrose side of things, but without necessarily having the the products. Having some of the products, a lot of local brands were fantastic, but there's certain things that local brands don't do. For instance, if you want a amazing stir fry mix, it's something so simple and you just think, I'll go to Tesco, I'll pick that up. But who does stir fry mixes branded? You don't get that. It's always own brand. And so if you're not partnered with somebody big who's doing that, how do you get it? And that was always a challenge we had. We always had gaps in the range due to not having a sufficiently big partner who could basically afford to give us their range. And I thought, who would be the best? And looking around the market, I'm thinking our customer base. I'm thinking Waitrose. It has to be Waitrose. Yeah. They're just they're the market leader in all the kind of things we're doing. So I contacted them, and I didn't think they would. I thought they'd be like, yeah, right, whatever. Like, we've got too many things going on ourselves. We're not going to entertain this. But funnily enough, they got back to me and they said, oh, we would be interested. So I had a couple calls. Couple meetings. They then flew to Edinburgh. I showed them around our facility. I mean, a little bit of fake it till you make it. I mean, they saw how we were genuinely operating, and it was true. But I was thinking, this isn't going to be good enough. So in the back of my mind, I was like, if we're dealing with these guys, we're going to need a much bigger depot. We're going to need walk-in refrigeration. We're going to need a level that we're not currently operating on. So whilst having those conversations with them, we were then looking out opportunities to buy a bigger warehouse and depot so that we could deal with them. It was, for Waitrose, it was a really quick turnaround. Most supermarkets, if they're doing a brand new venture like this, it could be a year in the making. We turned this around in 3 months. So from August with the first meeting with them, we launched in November. So it was really, really quick. So I was scrambling to try and find anything. And there was a contact we had, and he said, you know what, there's a place out in Newbridge that might just be perfect for you. And we looked around it, and it was just so cool because you walk around and you see it on like Greg Wallace were inside the factory, not quite on that scale, but you see these places and they've got docking stations for Arctic trucks, and you've got all these forklifts running around and all these things stacked high and rooms and temperature controlled rooms and all these things, and you just go, wow. One day we were, for the longest time that I was in the business, storing stuff in the cellar of one of our shops, just like, oh, we can get that at a good price, let's put it in the stock room and then we'll have a bit extra and stuff. So that something at that scale was just kind of out of the imagination for the longest time. And then we were in this place looking around, seeing all the potential it had, just thinking, this is a dream, like if we can do this. And we put a bid in for it. We got it. We got the keys less than a week before taking the first Waitrose delivery. So we, skin of our teeth, managed to get it. We might have been able to work in our old facility, but it would have been it would have been tough.
Really
it was
tough.
very,
Where
very
was the
tough.
old facility out of interest?
At Site Hill Industrial Estate.
Oh, was it? All right. Yeah. Okay.
But it was a decent size, but not really to cope with this level of business. And the parking wasn't very good, and we didn't have a docking station, so it was.
There was a lot of reasons why it wouldn't have worked, and our new facility is just brilliant. I'm still walking around like, this is so cool. We own this because it does. It looks so professional. I love showing people around because it just feels like all those companies that we aspire to be had places like that, and now we have that, and it feels great. But that first Waitrose truck, there was even issues with some of the internal systems in the lead up, and all of our orders might have fallen through, and we might not have even received the stock a couple of days before. And I'm just like, you okay, Joe? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just not telling anyone because I don't want to get anybody like upset about the whole situation. But it was. There was a few challenging moments there, but in the end, launch day, we got the stock in, we had our brand new facility, and it's just kind of flowed from there ever since, and it was fantastic. So it's one of the better things we've done. It's definitely put us up a notch, and we're hoping to just kind of run with that. We're just about to sign another 5-year deal with Waitrose. The initial deal was 3 years. It's worked very well for us. We love the team there. Their products are fantastic. And
sorry to interrupt. Just signed that.
It's already hot off the press. It's been signed.
Well done.
So that's us entering a new 5-year 5-year deal with them. So
congratulations. And can I, before we ask about what the future looks like, can we just go back on something that we know is Save the Children. What can you tell us a little bit about the association that you've got with that, please?
I was introduced to Save the Children when I was at the seminary. Although the church has its own teams out and about in all the various countries, the thing about Save the Children was that what really impressed me about them was the fact that they're in every country. They're even in Scotland helping out in more deprived areas. But they've got this global reach. And there was one particular aspect of them, because a lot of charities, every charity has its own merits. But Save the Children, I remember being told that one of the things about them was that when there's a war zone, or any conflict, or even an earthquake, or whatever disaster happens somewhere in the world, Save the Children are there right away. And one of the main jobs they do is they look for children who've been orphaned, and they sort of gather them to stop them being prey to being sold into slavery or whatever, And I thought, that's such a wonderful thing to do. And if I could just say something now, I personally believe that the safety and the well-being of every child in the world should be humanity's number one concern. Because these little babies are so vulnerable, that... and the fact that they do that, I just thought, well, this is it. I'm not giving any money to anybody else ever again. All the work has to be for Save the Children. And my wife, actually, she already subscribed, and she had a monthly, made monthly payments to them before we met. And so it's been very close. And having the 4 children, you can see why that would be the case. So, no, it's a great partnership. And we've collected quite a bit of money for them.
Yeah, and it's a long-standing relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. It's been over 40 years now.
Wow. Impressive.
That is really good.
So, what's next?
Well,
going back to the roots, mentioned my grandfather, he had coffee shops and ice cream shops. And because we've now we've moved one of our shops to bigger premises in the same street. So we thought, well, we've got an empty shop now. Why don't we do the ice cream and coffee that my grandfather used to do? So
cafe, gelateria, some other things. We're playing around with some ideas, but
I know there's plenty coffee shops about, but not many that would offer the whole ice cream side of it as well. I mean, the only one that comes to mind is Luca's, and they do a great job, and we'd like to do something similar. Being able to offer that, I think it would be quite nice, actually. And as I say, reconnecting with my past life and with my grandfather. So
we're going to try and do something a little bit different and kind of go into it humbly, because there's so many good coffee shops. I mean, I'm a huge fan of like artisanal coffee, and you can't go more than a mile any direction in Edinburgh without coming across 10 of them. So we're very aware of how good the market already is. So having a slightly different, let's say, ambience like we do in our stores, having maybe a slight twist on the bakery section, on the ice cream. And, if people like us, we'll consider opening in the evening too. That's still a thing that we're thinking about, things, hot chocolates, maybe wine, things like that. We're playing around with some ideas, so nothing's confirmed as yet, but we've got be our first foray into the hospitality industry, and we've got some really good friends in Edinburgh, whether that be the boys at Victoria Group, Mimi's Bakehouse, Cult Espresso. We're friends with all the teams there, and they've been really, really helpful in kind of discussing things with them over the years. So we're hopeful we'll be able to take some of that learnings and emulate what they're doing, at least in a small scale. And
is it your wife or partner?
Wife.
Yeah, so she's going to have a hand in this thing as well, is she?
Yeah, she used to be an interior designer. So we're needing, it's a whole new concept and blank canvas. So we need to decide, okay, how's this going to look? Yeah. And she's got a great eye. I feel like I have an okay eye as well, based on the fact that she liked the way I did my house before she moved in, and she was like, this is well, they're thinking that somebody had done it for me, and I was like, well, I'm flattered. I guess I did okay. Wow. So I've always loved design. I'm not saying I'm particularly good at it, but I love discussing this with her, and we could do this, and maybe these colors would work together, and we could try these things. But she's definitely going to be the lead on this thing, and with all her experience, I'm sure she's already drawing up some ideas. A lot of the color scheme being very like the Italian, the gold, the marble, that kind of thing. But also there was a green, or kind of rich royal green that used to be in our logo back in the day. We're now black and gold. Back in the day, we used to be green and gold, and she's wanting to bring some of that history back. If we're going back to the original Margiottas and what my grandfather did, we might as well look back on our original logos and try and bring a bit of flavour of that. So we'll like we say, we'll humbly go into it with all the will in the world, and the all our friends who are already operating successful businesses like that, giving us some support. We're actually getting the coffee that we're stocked will be roasted right next to our depot. So Cult Espresso, who I mentioned, they already do a kind of own brand coffee for us. So they're going to be roasting the coffee, and the guy who's roasting it even has an Italian name. I mean, he's very Australian. You hear his accent. Very much grew up in Melbourne, but Italian first and last name, and 2 Italian. So I think actually probably mentioning his name on the coffee might just give it some authenticity, with his Italian roots and all that. So
amazing. We ask all our guests, what is your guiding principle in business?
Well, we've just adopted a motto, and in Latin it says "semper ad meliora," which roughly translated means always striving to be better. And I think that's probably our guiding principle. We started off more humble than we are today, but nonetheless, that was always the thing, always striving to be better. And who knows, this time next year.
Brilliant.
Franco, Joe, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and we wish you all the luck in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.